My wife slept with my best friend. She said we can fix this. I said nothing. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I just disappeared for 14 years. When I finally came back, she wasn't ready for what she saw. She recognized me before I recognized her. I was standing in the lobby of a hotel in the town I grew up in, signing paperwork for a property acquisition, when a woman at the front desk said my name. Not the name I use now. The name I left behind 14 years ago. She said, Holden? Holden Marsh? I looked up. Took me about 4 seconds to place her. Not because she'd changed. Because I'd erased her so completely from my memory that seeing her face was like finding a receipt from a store that closed years ago. Familiar. But irrelevant. I said, I'm sorry. Do we know each other? She flinched. Full body. Like I'd hit her without raising a hand. She said, it's me. It's Gemma. Gemma Marsh. My ex-wife. The woman I was married to for 3 years before she slept with my best friend in the house I was still paying the mortgage on. Standing in a hotel lobby in a uniform shirt with her name tag slightly crooked. Working the front desk of a 3-star hotel in the town I left when I was 28. I looked at her. She looked at me. And the thing she wasn't ready for wasn't my suit or my car or the 6-figure property deal I was closing in the conference room behind me. The thing she wasn't ready for was my face. Because there was nothing on it. No anger. No satisfaction. No bitterness. No triumph. Nothing. The same nothing I felt when I left 14 years ago. The same nothing that drove me to pack a bag at 2 a.m. and drive until I hit a state line. I said, Gemma. Right. How are you? How are you? The thing you say to someone you used to know. Not someone you used to love. She heard the difference. I could see it register. The flattening of hope on her face when she realized I wasn't coming back for anything. Not revenge. Not closure. Not answers. I was signing paperwork in a hotel lobby and she happened to be behind the desk. She wasn't the reason I came back. She was the wallpaper. Let me go back 14 years. Because the story of how I left is the story of how I became someone she didn't recognize. I was 28. HVAC installer. $54,000 a year. Married to Gemma for 3 years. Best friend since college, Theo Gaines. Theo was the guy I called for everything. Football Sundays. Moving day. Bad news at 2 a.m. He was my person. The one outside the marriage who made the marriage bearable when it was hard and better when it was good. Gemma and I were trying for a baby. Year 2 of trying. No luck. The doctors said everything was fine. Just needed time. Time felt slow. Gemma was frustrated. I was tired. We were in that phase of a marriage where the silence between conversations starts to feel deliberate. Theo came over every Thursday. Poker night. Me, Theo, and 2 other guys. Beer. Cards. The kind of night that lets you pretend your life isn't stalling. Except Theo started coming over when it wasn't Thursday. He'd stop by Tuesday for lunch. Drop in Saturday to watch a game. Text Gemma directly to ask if I was home. I thought he was being a good friend. Checking in on a couple going through the stress of infertility. Keeping us social. Keeping us connected. He was keeping himself connected. To my wife. In my house. On days I worked 10-hour shifts and came home too tired to notice that the couch cushions were rearranged and the guest towels had been used. I found out on a Wednesday. Not through dramatic discovery. Through a receipt. A receipt from a restaurant called Amaro's. A place downtown Gemma and I had never been to. $127. 2 entrees. A bottle of wine. Charged to a card I didn't recognize. The receipt was in Gemma's jacket pocket. I found it while doing laundry because I did the laundry every Wednesday and Gemma never emptied her pockets. I looked at the receipt. $127. 2 entrees. 1 bottle of wine. Dated the previous Saturday. A Saturday I worked a double shift. 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. I came home at 9:30 and Gemma was in bed. Said she'd had a quiet night. Watched a movie. Went to bed early. Quiet night. $127 at a restaurant. 2 entrees. A bottle of wine. I didn't confront her. I folded the receipt. Put it in my wallet. Went to work. Came home. Acted normal. Because I needed to know the full scope before I said a word. The way you inspect a building before you decide whether to repair it or demolish it. I checked her phone that night while she showered. Not proud of it. But not sorry either. 243 messages between Gemma and Theo. Going back 3 months. Texts. Photos. Plans. The language of 2 people who'd been operating a second relationship inside the shell of my marriage. 3 months. Every Thursday poker night was a cover. Theo would come over, play cards with me for 2 hours, then text Gemma afterward. Sometimes the same night. Sometimes the next day. Always moving forward. Always deeper. I read every message. Sitting on my bed. In my house. While my wife showered 10 feet away. 243 messages. It took me 40 minutes. By message 200 I'd stopped feeling. Not numb. Empty. The specific kind of empty where your body decides the pain is too large to process in real time, so it archives everything for later. I put the phone back. She came out of the shower. Towel around her. She said, "You okay? You look tired." I said, "Long day. Going to bed early." She said, "Love you." I said, "Night." That was the last conversation I had with Gemma Marsh. I didn't sleep. I lay next to her until 1:30 a.m. Listening to her breathe. Thinking about 3 months of messages. Thinking about Theo sitting at my poker table drinking my beer while texting my wife under the table. Thinking about the guest towels. Thinking about Amaros. Thinking about the baby we were trying to have while she was building a life exit with my best friend. At 2 a.m. I got up. Quietly. The way I do everything when I've already made a decision. I packed one bag. Clothes for a week. My laptop. My father's watch. My wallet with the receipt from Amaros still inside. I walked through the house one last time. Kitchen. Living room. The poker table where Theo sat every Thursday pretending to be my friend. The couch where the cushions never looked right. The bedroom where my wife was sleeping under a lie she'd been constructing for 3 months. I left my phone on the kitchen counter. Not as a message. Because I didn't want to be found. A phone is a leash. Cut the leash and you're free. I left my wedding ring next to the phone. I left a note. 4 words. I know about Theo. I drove. 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. No direction. No plan. No destination. Just forward. Through 3 states. 14 hours. Until I hit Reno, Nevada. A city I'd never been to. A city that sounded like starting over. A city where nobody named Gemma or Theo had ever existed. I checked into a motel. $48 a night. Paid cash. Used a name that wasn't mine for the first 3 days until I realized nobody was looking for me because the man I left behind wasn't the kind of man people chase. He was the kind of man people replace. That's what Gemma and Theo taught me. I was replaceable. The HVAC guy who did the laundry on Wednesdays and worked doubles on Saturdays. Functional. Reliable. Forgettable. The kind of man a wife cheats on because he's always at work and his best friend is always on the couch. I decided in that motel room in Reno that I would never be replaceable again. Year 1. Reno. No contacts. No friends. No history. I got a job with a mechanical contractor. Commercial HVAC. $26 an hour. Less than I made before, but enough. I rented a studio apartment. $700 a month. Ate cheap. Slept alone. Worked 60 hours a week because the alternative was sitting in a room remembering 243 messages. During year 1 I learned commercial refrigeration. Industrial systems. The kind of work that residential guys don't touch because it requires certifications and math and the willingness to crawl through spaces that smell like ammonia for 8 hours. I earned 3 certifications in 11 months. Because studying until midnight is easier when midnight used to mean lying next to someone who's thinking about your best friend. Year 2. Promoted. $38 an hour. Started supervising installations. The company owner, a man named Garrett, noticed me. He said, "Holden. You work like a man who's running from something." I said, "I'm not running from anything. I'm running toward everything I should have started building 10 years ago." He said, "Fair enough. How would you feel about managing the Henderson project? $2.4 million installation. Data center cooling. Biggest job we've had. I managed it. Came in $180,000 under budget. 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Garrett gave me a bonus. $12,000. First real money I'd ever earned that felt like mine. Not ours. Not the mortgage. Not the trying for a baby fund. Mine. Year 4. Garrett offered me a partnership. 30% equity in the company for $80,000. I had $62,000 saved. He financed the remaining $18,000 against future earnings. Year 6. Revenue, $4.2 million. We'd expanded into 3 states. Data centers. Hospitals. Industrial plants. I ran operations. Garrett ran sales. We didn't talk about personal lives. Didn't need to. The work was enough. I dated once in year 5. A woman named Iris. Smart. Kind. She asked me about my past on our 3rd date. I said, I was married. It ended. She said, how? I said, she chose someone else. I chose to disappear. She said, do you miss her? I said, I miss the version of me that trusted someone completely. I don't miss the person who broke that trust. Iris and I lasted 8 months. She said I was present but unreachable. She said being with me was like sitting next to a window that was always closed. She wasn't wrong. But I wasn't ready to open it. Not yet. Year 8. Garrett retired. Sold me his remaining 70% for $1.1 million. Financed over 5 years. The company was mine. Marsh Mechanical Systems. I used my last name. The name Gemma used to share. Revenue year 8, $6.1 million. 34 employees. An office building I bought outright. A house in the hills above Reno with a view of the mountains that made the motel room feel like a different century. During year 8 I hired an attorney. Not for business. For the divorce. I'd never filed. For 8 years I was legally still married to Gemma Marsh. She'd never filed either. I don't know why. Maybe she was waiting. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she assumed I was dead. My attorney filed in Nevada. Gemma was served at the address I'd left 8 years earlier. Same house. She still lived there. The process server reported that she opened the door, read the papers, and sat down on the porch step without saying a word. She signed. Didn't contest. Didn't ask for anything. The divorce was finalized in 60 days. Gemma Marsh became Gemma Lennox again. Her maiden name. Like she was erasing me the same way I'd erased her. Fair. We were even on the erasing. Year 10. I met a woman named Sunday. Named after the day of the week because her parents were the kind of people who named children after feelings. Sunday was a landscape architect. Built gardens for commercial properties. She designed the courtyard for my office building. She didn't ask about my past on the first date. Or the second. On the third she said, I know there's a story. Everyone in Reno has a story. You can tell me when you want to. Or never. I'm not going anywhere. I told her on date 7. All of it. Gemma. Theo. The receipt from Amaro's. The 243 messages. The ring on the counter. The 14-hour drive. The motel. She listened without interrupting. When I finished she said, you didn't scream. You didn't fight. You just left. I said, I left because fighting would have meant she mattered enough to fight with. She didn't. Not after message 243. Sunday said, that's either the healthiest thing I've ever heard or the most frightening. I said, probably both. She said, are you still the man who leaves? I said, I'm the man who chooses better now. Sunday and I got married in year 12. Small ceremony. 20 people. On a Sunday. Because she thought it was funny and I thought she was right. We have a daughter. June. She's 18 months old. She has Sunday's eyes and my stubbornness and a laugh that sounds like the first honest sound I've heard since I was 28. Year 14. The trip back. My company was acquiring a commercial property in my hometown. A warehouse complex being converted to mixed-use retail. $3.8 million project. The seller insisted on in-person closing. Old school. I hadn't been back in 14 years. Hadn't driven through. Hadn't Googled. Hadn't looked at a map. The town existed in a sealed compartment in my mind labeled before and I didn't open sealed compartments. But the deal was worth $3.8 million and the seller wanted handshakes and eye contact. So I flew back. Rented a car. Drove through streets I used to know. Past the house I used to own. Someone else lives there now. Different paint. Different car in the driveway. Different life behind the same windows. I checked into the Ridgemont Hotel. 3-star. Clean. Central. The kind of hotel business travelers book when they're staying 2 nights and don't need luxury. The lobby. The front desk. The woman behind it. Gemma. I didn't recognize her for 4 seconds. Not because she looked bad. Because my brain had deleted the file. 14 years of not thinking about someone erases the shortcut your mind uses to identify a face. She was data that had been moved to cold storage and I had to retrieve it manually. She recognized me instantly. Because I was the man she'd been thinking about for 14 years. The difference between us was the difference between the person who leaves and the person who's left. The one who leaves deletes. The one who's left replays. She said, Holden? Holden Marsh? I said, I'm sorry. Do we know each other? 4 seconds of her face breaking. 4 seconds of realization that the man she cheated on 14 years ago didn't even recognize her at a hotel desk. Then it clicked. Gemma. Right. She said, You're here. In town. I said, business trip. Closing on a property across town. How are you? How are you? I watched that question land on her the way a stone lands on glass. Because how are you is what you ask strangers. And she just realized that's what she was to me. A stranger I used to be married to. She said, I'm okay. I work here. Front desk manager. I said, that's good. Good for you. Good for you. The sentence that ends conversations instead of starting them. She heard it. The finality. The politeness that's worse than rudeness because rudeness means you still feel something and politeness means you don't. She said, Holden. Can we talk? After my shift. I get off at 6. I looked at my watch. I had a dinner meeting with the property seller at 7. There was an hour gap. I could have said no. Should have said no. But I looked at Gemma standing behind a hotel desk in a town I left 14 years ago and I realized something. I wasn't afraid of this conversation anymore. There was a time when seeing her would have broken me. Now it was just a scheduling question. I said, I have a meeting at 7. I can do 15 minutes at 6. 15 minutes. She asked for a conversation and I gave her a window smaller than a dental appointment. 6 p.m. hotel restaurant corner booth. She'd changed out of her uniform. Wore a blue sweater. She looked older. Tired. Not in a bad way. In the way people look when 14 years happen without the thing they were waiting for. She sat down. I was already there. Coffee in front of me. Black. No sugar. The same way I drank it 14 years ago. That detail registered on her face. She said, "You look different. I mean the same but different. You look like you." I said, "I am me." She said, "I need to say something I've been holding for 14 years." I said, "Okay." She said, "I'm sorry. For Theo. For everything. For the 3 months. For the lying. For the Saturday at Amaro's when you were working a double and I was." She stopped. Started again. "I was the worst version of myself with Theo. He was easy and you were hard. Not hard as a person. Hard as a life. We were trying for a baby and it wasn't working and I was sad all the time and Theo made me not sad. That's not an excuse. It's just what happened." I said, "I know what happened. I read 243 messages." She said, "I know." The note said, "I know about Theo. 4 words. You left with 4 words and a ring on the counter and I've been sitting with that silence for 14 years. I said, "I'm sorry the silence was hard." She said, "It wasn't hard. It was devastating. You disappeared. Completely. No phone. No email. No forwarding address. I didn't know if you were alive. For 3 years I didn't know if you were dead in a ditch or living in another state or." She stopped again. "I went to the police. Filed a missing person report. They found your car registered in Nevada 6 months later but by then you'd already." She took a breath. "You'd already stopped being someone I could find." I said, "I stopped being someone you could find because I stopped being someone you wanted to keep." She looked at the table. I said, "Gemma, I need to tell you something and I need you to hear it without interpreting it as cruelty. Because it's not cruel. It's just true." She said, "Okay." I said, "I don't hate you. I don't resent you. I don't think about you. Not in 14 years. Not once a year. Not on our anniversary. Not on the day I left. You exist in my memory the way a house I used to live in exists. I know it's there. I don't drive past it." Her eyes filled up. I said, "I built a company. $6.1 million in revenue. I got married again. I have a daughter. She's 18 months old. Her name is June. She laughs at everything and she has her mother's eyes and she's the reason I know that leaving you was the best decision I ever made. Not because you were terrible. Because you were a locked door and I spent 3 years trying to open it with the wrong key. Theo was the proof that the door was never going to open for me. So I stopped trying. And I found a door that was already open." She was crying. Not the dramatic kind. The slow kind. Where tears fall without permission and you don't wipe them because wiping them means admitting they're there. She said, "What happened to Theo?" I said, "I don't know. And I need you to understand how completely I mean that. I don't know where he is. I don't know what he does. I don't know if he's alive. And I don't spend a single calorie wondering. He was my best friend for 9 years and he slept with my wife and I deleted him the same way I deleted you. Completely. Without looking back." She said, "He left me. 6 months after you did. Said he couldn't handle the guilt. Moved to Portland. Haven't heard from him since." I said, "So he left too?" She said, "Everyone left. You. Theo. Friends who took sides. My parents stopped talking to me for 2 years because they loved you more than they loved my explanation." I said, "That must have been hard." She said, "Is that all you have for 14 years? That must have been hard." I said, "What do you want me to say?" She said, "I want you to say you felt something. When you left. When you drove away. When you sat in whatever motel room you ended up in. I want you to say it hurt. Because I need to know the man I married wasn't a machine that packed a bag and drove to Nevada without feeling anything." I said, "I felt everything. For about 14 hours. From the receipt to the last state line. I felt rage and grief and betrayal and the specific kind of loneliness that comes when you realize the 2 people closest to you were the 2 people farthest away. I felt all of that for 14 hours. And then I stopped. Because feeling it wasn't going to change what happened. It was only going to slow down what came next. So I stopped." She said, "You stopped feeling?" I said, "I stopped feeling about you. I started feeling about everything else. My work. My company. My wife. My daughter. The life I built has more feeling in a single Tuesday than the life I left had in 3 years." She wiped her eyes. She said, "Are you happy?" I said, "I'm present. Which is better than happy. Happy comes and goes. Present stays." She said, "I've been waiting for you to come back for 14 years. I said, "I didn't come back for you. I came back for a warehouse on Gibson Road. You happened to be behind the desk." She flinched again. Same full body reaction from the lobby. The flinch of a woman who just realized that 14 years of waiting ended with a warehouse. I said, Gemma. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because you deserve the truth more than you deserve comfort. You spent 14 years waiting for a man who wasn't thinking about you. That's not your fault. But it's the truth. And the kindest thing I can do is tell you so you can stop waiting. She said, I don't know how to stop. I said, you find a door that's open. The same way I did. I left $8 on the table for the coffee. Stood up. She stood up. She said, Holden. I said, yeah. She said, the note. 4 words. I know about Theo. I've read it every day for 14 years. It's in my nightstand. Same paper. Same handwriting. I've read it so many times the ink is almost gone. I said, throw it away. She said, I can't. I said, you can. It's just paper. The same way I was just a husband. And Theo was just a friend. And Amaro's was just a restaurant. None of it is what it was anymore. It's just what it left behind. And what it left behind is 2 people standing in a hotel restaurant. One of them is going to a meeting about a warehouse. The other one is going to clock back in tomorrow at a desk where her ex-husband checked in and treated her like a stranger. I said, I'm sorry that's what this is. But this is what this is. I walked to the door. She said one more thing. She said, she's lucky. Your wife. June's mother. She's lucky. I said, her name is Sunday. And she'd tell you luck has nothing to do with it. She'd tell you she just opened the door. I left. Walked through the lobby. Past the desk where she'd said my name 3 hours earlier. Past the revolving doors. Into the rental car. Drove to the meeting. Closed the deal. $3.8 million. Handshake. Signatures. Done. Flew home the next morning. Sunday picked me up at the airport. June was in the car seat in the back. She screamed when she saw me. The good scream. The one that means she remembered my face after 2 days. Sunday said, how was the trip? I said, close the deal. She said, anything else happen? I said, I ran into Gemma. At the hotel. Sunday looked at me. She said, are you okay? I said, I'm great. She said, did it bring anything up? I said, she asked me if I was happy. Sunday said, what did you say? I said I'm present. Sunday smiled. She said, that's better than happy. I said, that's what I told her. We drove home. June fell asleep. The mountains were out the window. The house was ahead. The door was open. It's been open for years. And I'm never looking for the locked one again.